The night sky glowed an angry red as flames devoured the forest, roaring like 1,000 demons. Sparks shot into the heavens, carried by the wind, raining down like fiery stars. The once peaceful mountain range had become a fiery hell, and every living creature within it scrambled desperately for survival. Elias had never seen anything like it. He was a man of the village, strong from years of labor, but what stood before him that night was no ordinary blaze. The fire moved with a will of its own, hungry, merciless, swallowing everything in its path. Villagers fled to safer ground, clutching their children, driving their livestock away. But Elias could not leave. He had heard the desperate cries of animals trapped deeper within the inferno, and his heart refused to abandon them. Clutching a wet cloth over his mouth and nose, he plunged into the choking smoke. Each step felt like walking into death, his lungs burning, his skin prickling with the heat. The fire snapped at him from every side, trees groaning before crashing to the ground in showers of sparks. Somewhere ahead, beneath the crackle of burning wood, came the sound of frantic howls. Elias stumbled toward it, shielding his face from the searing air. Finally, he saw them, a wolf pack, huddled together near a half-collapsed den. The fire had cut them off, trapping them in a circle of flames. The mother wolf snarled as Elias approached, her golden eyes fierce even in terror. But Elias understood, this was no time for fear or distrust. "I'm not your enemy," he whispered hoarsely, though the wolves could not understand his words. The smallest pups whimpered, their paws scorching on the heated earth. Elias scanned the flames and found a narrow path, blocked by burning branches but still possible to clear. Summoning every ounce of strength, he heaved the fallen timber aside, sparks biting into his arms, smoke stinging his eyes until tears blurred his vision. He coughed violently, nearly collapsing, but the path opened, just wide enough for the wolves to escape. The pack hesitated. The mother wolf growled, torn between instinct to protect her young and the terror of trusting a human. Then, with a sharp bark, she pushed her pups forward. One by one, the wolves darted through the smoky gap, fur singed, eyes wild with fear, until they were free on the other side. Elias staggered after them, his body battered by heat. He collapsed to his knees in the ash, gasping for breath. For a moment he thought he would not rise again. Then he felt it, the presence of the wolves. They stood just beyond the smoke, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The mother wolf lingered the longest, her head tilted in silent acknowledgement, before vanishing into the burning forest with her pack. As the inferno roared behind him, Elias lay on the ground, too weak to move, but alive. He had not saved himself, but he had saved them. And though he could not know it then, the wild had marked him forever. Winter passed slowly, and with it, the memory of fire dimmed for the villagers. The forest had healed in patches, though blackened trees still stood like charred skeletons. Elias, too, bore scars, faint burns on his arms, a rawness in his lungs that flared whenever smoke rose from the hearth. Yet life had to move on. He repaired fences, chopped wood, and tried to bury the memory of the wolves, eyes watching him through the smoke. But not all memories fade so easily. It began subtly. At dusk, as Elias returned from the fields, he sometimes felt watched. The sensation was sharp, primal, like a chill running up his spine. Turning, he would catch glimpses, two glowing eyes beyond the tree line, low to the ground, vanishing when he blinked. At first, he thought it a trick of the light, the lingering fear of that night in the fire. But the sightings grew more frequent. Always at the edge of the forest. Always silent. Always watching. The villagers noticed too. Strange tracks appeared near barns, paw prints in the snow too large for dogs. Chickens went missing, though never from Elias's home. "The wolves are back," people whispered. The fire drove them closer, made them bold. Some demanded hunts to drive them away. Others spoke in hushed voices of curses, of forest spirits taking the form of beasts. Elias listened but said nothing. Deep inside, he felt a strange certainty. These were the very wolves he had saved. They had not forgotten. One evening, as the first snow fell, Elias walked beyond the village, drawn by an unshakable pull. The forest was quiet, muffled by the blanket of white. There, at the border between field and trees, stood the pack. The mother wolf was larger than he remembered, her coat thick, her eyes blazing gold in the fading light. Around her, The grown pups watched in silence. Elias froze, his heart pounding. Instinct told him to back away, to flee. But another instinct, older, deeper, urged him to stand his ground. The wolves did not advance, nor did they retreat. They simply watched, their breath steaming in the cold air. Minutes passed, stretched thin by the tension. Then, with a low rumble, the mother wolf stepped forward, not threatening, not submissive, simply acknowledging. Her gaze locked with Elias's, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to fall away. Man and beast, fire and survival, bound by something wordless. Then she turned, leading the pack silently back into the trees. Elias stood long after they were gone, snow gathering on his shoulders. He could not explain it, not even to himself, but he knew, a pact had been formed that night. No words, no handshakes, no promises. Only memory and instinct, sealed in silence. The villagers would continue to fear the wolves, but Elias felt none. Whenever he saw their eyes glowing in the dark, he no longer shivered with dread. Instead, he felt watched over, protected, as if the wild itself had chosen him. He did not yet understand the cost of such a bond. But the forest remembered, and wolves never forget a debt. The winter had deepened, hard and merciless. Snow blanketed the village in silence, muffling every sound except the crunch of boots and the creak of wood. Life was difficult, but the people endured as they always had. Elias worked each day repairing roofs and chopping firewood, grateful for the quiet peace the season offered. The wolves still lingered at the forest's edge, watching unseen, and though the villagers muttered curses and sharpened their spears, they never dared touch Elias. It was as if even the animals of the wild had claimed him. Then came the terrible day. At dawn, the sound of hooves shattered the stillness. Not the familiar rhythm of farm horses, but the heavy, clattering thunder of armored riders. Raiders. Their banners were black, their faces hidden by steel and cloth, their weapons gleaming cruelly in the pale sun. They descended upon the village with merciless efficiency, setting torches to roofs and barns, cutting down any who resisted. Screams rose into the sky, mingling with the smoke that curled upward like a grim omen. Elias rushed into the chaos, axe in hand. He fought not for himself but for his neighbors, for the families crying out in terror. He swung until his muscles burned, felling one raider, then another. But they were too many. For every man he struck down, 3 more surrounded him. A blade slashed across his back, another tore into his arm. He staggered, blood soaking into the snow. Still, he refused to fall. "Take him alive," one of the raiders barked. "He fights like a beast." They beat him down with the flats of their swords, leaving him gasping in the snow. Around him, the village burned. Children were dragged away, women cried for mercy, and the old were cut down where they stood. Elias tried to rise again, but a heavy boot pinned him to the ground. The raider sneered, pressing the cold edge of a blade against his throat. Through blurred vision, Elias looked around desperately. Smoke choked the air, the world spinning in fire and ash. He thought of the wolves, of golden eyes watching from the tree line. Would they come now, or had he been a fool to believe in that silent bond? The raiders laughed, mocking his struggle. One raised a torch to the last standing hut, where a young boy cowered. Elias roared in defiance, straining against the weight pinning him. His voice cracked the air, raw with fury and despair. And then, it came. A sound that froze the blood of every raider. A howl, long, piercing, filled with primal rage. From the forest, more voices answered, overlapping in a chorus of death. The horses reared, snorting in fear, as the men looked around in confusion. Elias's heart pounded, his breath ragged, yet a flicker of hope lit within him. The howls grew closer, louder, until the very snow seemed to tremble. The terrible day had reached its darkest moment. But in that darkness, Elias realized, he was not alone. The pact was awakening. The silence after the wolves' howls lasted only a heartbeat, but in that pause, every raider felt the weight of something ancient bearing down upon them. Then the forest erupted. Shadows broke from the tree line, swift and silent at first, then thundering across the snow. The wolves. Their eyes gleamed like molten gold, their teeth flashing white as they surged toward the village. The pack was no longer the frightened creatures Elias had once saved. They had grown powerful, hardened by survival, moving with a terrifying unity that no army could match. The raiders' horses screamed, thrashing as the wolves darted among them. A stallion reared, throwing its rider into the snow, where 3 wolves leapt upon him with brutal precision. Steel clashed, men shouted, but the wolves did not falter. They tore through armor, ripping flesh, snapping bones, their snarls mixing with the screams of men who had once thought themselves invincible. Elias, still pinned to the ground, lifted his head in awe. Through the smoke and chaos, he saw the mother wolf leading the charge. Her massive frame moved like lightning, her jaws closing around the throat of a raider who tried to raise his blade. Blood sprayed against the snow, black under the firelight. She did not pause, did not hesitate, her only purpose was to protect. The raider holding Elias stumbled back in horror, his bravado crumbling as the wolves encircled them. With a desperate shout, he swung his sword at the nearest beast, but the wolf dodged and lunged, teeth sinking deep into his arm. He screamed, dropping his weapon, before another wolf slammed him into the ground. Elias rolled aside, gasping, clutching his wounded side, unable to believe what his eyes were witnessing. The pack moved like a storm, every strike, every leap coordinated as if guided by a single mind. Raiders who tried to flee found themselves hunted down, dragged into the snow with chilling efficiency. Those who remained fought desperately, blades flashing in the firelight, but terror had already broken them. Against men, they were warriors. Against wolves, they were prey. Elias staggered to his feet, leaning heavily on his axe. His vision blurred, his body screamed in pain, but a strange strength welled inside him. He could feel the pack's presence, not just around him but within him, as if their howls echoed through his very blood. When a raider lunged at him, Elias swung with every ounce of his will, the axe. Biting deep, the man fell, and for the first time that day, Elias stood tall again. The battle raged on, but the outcome was already clear. The wolves showed no mercy. By the time the last raider fell silent, the snow was stained crimson, the flames casting a grim glow over the ruined village. And then, as suddenly as they had come, the wolves drew back. They did not chase the surviving horses. They did not linger over the dead. Instead, they gathered around Elias. The mother wolf stood closest, her eyes fixed on him, unwavering. In that gaze, Elias saw neither savagery nor pity, but recognition. The pack had returned, not as beasts, but as protectors. The bond forged in fire had been fulfilled in blood. The battlefield lay silent. The snow, once pure white, was now painted in streaks of ash and blood. Smoke from the burning huts drifted lazily into the dark sky, glowing red from dying embers. Around Elias, the bodies of raiders were strewn like broken dolls, their weapons scattered uselessly in the frost. The only movement came from the wolves, their great chests rising and falling, their breath clouding in the frigid air. Elias stood unsteadily, his body trembling with exhaustion. Cuts and bruises covered him, his axe slick with blood, his hands numb from cold and violence. He should have felt triumphant, but instead there was only a heavy, surreal silence. He turned slowly, eyes meeting those of the pack that had saved him. The mother wolf stood at the front, larger and more imposing than he remembered. Her golden eyes glowed with something beyond the wild, something Elias could only describe as knowing. Behind her, the grown pups stood in perfect stillness, their ears pricked, their gaze fixed on him. They did not growl, they did not advance, yet their presence was overwhelming, filling the air with a primal reverence. Elias swallowed hard. "You came," he whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking. The mother wolf tilted her head slightly, as though she understood. Then she stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Elias's pulse quickened. Instinct told him to back away, but he forced himself to remain still. She circled him once, slow and deliberate, brushing so close that he could feel the heat of her fur, smell the musky scent of wilderness clinging to her coat. The other wolves watched, waiting. Finally, she stopped in front of him again, her gaze piercing his. In that silent exchange, Elias understood the truth. This was no chance rescue, no random act of nature. It was a debt. On the night of the fire, he had given the wolves their lives. Tonight, they had returned the gift. But debts in the wild were not paid in words or gold. They were bound in blood, in survival, in the unspoken laws older than man. Elias realized then that he and the wolves were tied forever, by fire, by fate, by something neither human nor beast could ever break. The mother wolf raised her head and released a long, haunting howl. The rest of the pack joined her, their voices merging into a chorus that shook the night. The sound rolled over the ruined village, carrying both sorrow and triumph, a lament for the fallen and a warning to any who might come again. When the last echo faded, the wolves turned. One by one, they slipped back into the forest, vanishing into the shadows between the trees. The mother wolf lingered the longest, casting one final look at Elias before melting into the darkness. Elias stood alone in the aftermath, the wind biting his skin, the fire crackling low. His village lay in ruins, but he was alive. Alive because the wild had remembered him. As he gazed toward the tree line, he whispered, "We are bound now, forever." And somewhere in the depths of the forest, a wolf's howl answered.